This week on the waiver wire, we have some rookie wide receivers stepping up, some backup running backs actually worth picking up, and even some tight ends. If you haven't tried Underdog yet, now is the perfect time. New customers can take advantage of the special pick for Brock Purdy. Just go higher than half a yard. Just make sure when you sign up, you use promo code ENDGAME, and that will get you a 100% deposit match up to $500 while that deal lasts. But first, the injury report. Thankfully, not a heavy week in terms of the quantity of injuries, but still some names you need to know about. Possibly the most confusing situation here is Deshaun Watson. The second time now this season, he's had an injury where he was cleared to come back, but didn't do that. Early in the game, Watson threw a really bad interception and landed. You could see his head did hit the turf, but after going through the concussion protocol, the steps seemed he was fine and he was cleared to return, but he didn't do that, just like with the shoulder a couple of weeks ago. Now you've got to legitimately question, what is his intention here? Why is he not playing? And is his head really in the game? That's a discussion we won't have right here, right now. But PJ Walker, again, led the team to a victory. There's a good chance PJ Walker plays again next week. I can't say I really know what's going on with Watson or that I really care at this point. I just find him completely impossible to trust in fantasy. So if you were hoping that he would come back and lead your team, I would say start looking for a replacement. Now, not long after that Watson injury, they had a big play, got the scoring started, and what will end up being the highest scoring game of the week. Tell me if you had that on your bingo card. Browns-Colts. But Jerome Ford went for a 69-yard touchdown run, had another nice day statistically, but it ended poorly because he went out with an injury. And this one didn't look very good. In the replay, you can see his ankle twisted. There's some suspicion it might be a high ankle sprain. Of course, we don't know right now, but definitely a chance that he misses next week. Now, the RB2 there, who's also been scoring touchdowns lately, is Kareem Hunt. Obviously, he's going to be a pickup to consider if Ford is out, and maybe even if he isn't. Pierre Strong was the next in line. He did get some touches. I don't think we can say he's fantasy relevant unless you're very, very desperate. But right now, this is something to monitor. And then a couple injuries in Green Bay, too. After not going off against the Broncos, Christian Watson ended his day with an injury, and it's a knee injury. Not a lot of news here because it happened very late. You've got to think, well, Watson has a very long history in his short career of injuries. Look, Romeo Doubs filled in very nicely. Jaden Reed, these two guys could be strong replacements for Watson. I mean, hate to see a guy so talented just constantly getting injured. It could be another prolonged absence, but let's see what happens. And then with Luke Musgrave, he left the game, concussion protocol, because of another dirty hit by Kareem Jackson of the Broncos. Went high. Musgrave went through the steps. You know how this goes. He'll probably be in the protocol all week, may come back, may take another week or two. It just depends. Also, Gerald Everett, tight end for the Chargers, quad injury. He did score a touchdown again in this game. Not a lot of yardage. That's just kind of how he's going to be used. So if he's out and if you are still desperate at tight end, well, you could consider Donald Parham because that's exactly his game. Might get a touchdown, but give you no yardage. And then a couple of apparent non-issues. You might have seen Saquon Barkley in that one play holding his left arm, kind of dangling down. He said it's hyperextended, but it sounds like he'll be all right, so nothing to worry about here. But interesting to note that both backup running backs for the Giants, Eric Gray and Gary Brightwell, did leave the game with injury. So we might actually see more Barkley next week. And Jalen Waddle did go back and forth between the sideline during the Sunday night game with back spasms, but he finished the game. He wound up okay. Don't think this is a real issue that'll linger. And then the most bizarre and frustrating non-injury really of the week was Bijan Robinson. I know you think that Arthur Smith is really just trying to mess with you and just hates all fantasy football teams, and maybe he does. But it sounds like either there was some sort of illness that Bijan just didn't feel well. Either way, doesn't sound like he's hurt. He did play even at the very end of the game. Don't know why, but whatever. It sounds like he'll be fine. All right, now time for the top waiver wire ads heading into week 8. Let's start with the Rams. We had 1,000,001 questions about who's going to be the lead running back for the Rams this week. Had no idea because Sean McVay wouldn't tell, and they had 4 guys who would possibly be active. Well, the one that was most picked up in fantasy leagues was Zach Evans, the rookie. It would make sense, give him a shot. But John McVay doesn't think that way, and he apparently doesn't trust Evans, didn't even touch the ball. We did get kind of a hint over the weekend that it might be the veteran duo of Royce Freeman and Darrell Henderson, and that's exactly what it was. And the starter was the guy I'm going to recommend, and that's Darrell Henderson. Now, just taking a look here, Henderson was technically the lead back. Freeman technically was the more effective back because he averaged about 5.5 yards per carry. Henderson only 3.4 yards per carry, but I'm going to look at Henderson because I think he's the guy that obviously McVay more familiar with. He got 18 carries compared to Freeman's 12. Also, he got 2 targets in the passing game and Freeman got none, but more importantly, Henderson got a touchdown because he got the goal line carries. I mean, we know what he can do in this offense because we've seen it. Just 2 years ago, Darrell Henderson was a staple of the Rams' backfield. If Henderson can put up similar numbers to what he did the last time he was a starter in this offense, he could be a solid every week RB2 until Kyrie Williams comes back off IR, and we know that's going to be at least a couple more weeks. Now, one guy from the waiver wire list from last week that if you picked up, he did pay off. Hope you started D'Onta Foreman for the Bears. Last week he was solid but not spectacular. This week, better as a rusher, went for 89 yards and involved a little bit as a pass catcher, 3 catches for 31 yards. But of course, the main appeal here is that he scored not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns. It was kind of a surprise that Rashawn Johnson is still not back from the concussion protocol. I mean, you'd think he'd be back next week, but at this point, who knows if there's still symptoms. But at this point, I would also say it may not matter because the way Foreman played this past week, he should be the guy again. At the very least, he'll get the majority of the touches. We know there's touchdown upside here. They're going to lean on him with a rookie quarterback. So Foreman looks like a solid play. And also the fact that he gets the Chargers, who although they've statistically improved as far as rushing defense, they're still the 9th worst in terms of fantasy points allowed per game to the position. And then I already mentioned with Jerome Ford being injured, possibly in line to miss a game or two with that ankle injury, it could be Kareem Hunt back to the starting job in Cleveland. These 3 running backs reclaiming their starting jobs, it feels like it's 2021 all over again. Now with Hunt, I was kind of reluctant to get in on him because, he scored a touchdown last week, but it was on a trick play. It was kind of a fluky thing. Look, this week he scored twice again, once on a very short yardage play, and then again, and then now Jerome Ford is out. It's like we got to pay attention to him, especially in a standard league, because he clearly has touchdown upside, and now he could get even more carries. Only 31 rushing yards here, but again, that's because Jerome Ford was there most of the game. You've also got to think, if it's PJ Walker again, which wouldn't surprise me at this point, maybe they'll lean even more on Hunt, both as a rusher and a receiver. So while that might pain me a little bit to think of Kareem Hunt as a startable asset in a fantasy league, have to admit that it's true. He's a guy that you really should go out and pick up. Now from the old running backs to the new receivers, let's talk about some rookies here, starting with JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba in Seattle. A lot of people are wondering if DK Metcalf doesn't play, is Smith and Jigba a viable streamer? Yes, he was. Not only did he catch 4 passes for 63 yards and a touchdown, he led the team in targets. 4 catches isn't a lot, but what you have to like is the fact that he's finally getting a deeper average depth of target. You got to remember, over the first 4 games before Seattle was on bye, he was the lowest among all wide receivers in the NFL in terms of ADOT. Finally, he's catching passes beyond the line of scrimmage. A lot of things have changed up in this offense. They've got some of their offensive linemen back. So JSN finally being used as an actual wide receiver. You'll have to like the fact that he's getting a higher yard per reception average, and he was targeted in the end zone and caught it for a touchdown. Now, DK Metcalf may return next week, but I don't think it matters. There's still room for multiple receivers to thrive in this offense, because in this game in Week 7, we didn't just see JSN have some nice stats. Jake Bobo also caught a touchdown and caught some passes. So even if Smith and Jigba goes back to being the number 3 receiver in this offense, he still has some fantasy relevance. Now, a lot of people might look at the line that Josh Downs put up in Week 7, 5 catches, 125 yards and a touchdown, and think, well, that's interesting. Maybe this guy I should consider picking up. A lot of our endgame viewers already picked him up because I talked about him 2 weeks ago on a waiver wire video. Now, I talked about him because he was going to face Tennessee. It was a great matchup. He was getting more involved, and sure enough, he had, to that date, his best game. I will have to admit that this week, I was not in on him because going against Cleveland, which was statistically the best defense in the league, it was not a good spot. Didn't really trust Gardner Minshew. So sure enough, what happened? the very first drive of the game, I think it was a free play because somebody jumped off sides. He chucked it deep, downs got loose, and it was a 59-yard touchdown. Go figure. But here's the thing, it wasn't just that play. If it was just a fluky play, I could say, all right, whatever, it is what it is. But the funny thing happened is that he kept getting targeted, and it was down the field too, not just short dink and dunk passes like we had seen in the first few weeks with him. And the other thing, just like with Smith and Jigba, is that Downs, as a rookie, he led his team in targets this past week. He's legitimately emerging in his passing offense, which is overall just a better offense than anybody expected, especially with Anthony Richardson out. Minshew can get him the ball. He's going to be a guy you can trust in PPR. So Downs, this is a good time to target him if he's available in your league. Then I'm going to go a little deeper. This is a guy I have talked about a while ago, early in the season. New England's passing game was one to avoid, and I'm not saying I'm all in on it, but it has looked better. And part of that is because they finally are using more of Demario Douglas. Douglas, aka Pop, went for 4 catches, 54 yards, and he ran it one time for 20 yards. Although he didn't score, he did see multiple red zone targets, including one in the end zone. In week 7, we saw Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas occupy 13 targets. All other receivers in New England combined for 5. Now, I know Juju Smith-Schuster was out, and so that's why Douglas did get more involved. Whether Juju comes back next week, I don't think it really matters because we've seen what Juju is right now. Not inspiring. Douglas was good. He's been more effective than Juju. He should be used more in this offense, and I think he will be. So this is getting deeper, I admit, but if you need some help and a guy in a PPR league who can give you a floor, I think Douglas might do that. And now rookie tight end that hasn't been talked about lately because it wasn't until week 7 that Dalton Kincaid finally had what I think we can consider his breakout game. 8 catches for 75 yards, and his 8 targets were the second most on the team, of course, behind Stephon Diggs. Meanwhile, Dawson Knox, the other tight end there, only had 1 catch. Now, Kincaid's been on the injury report a lot over the last few weeks. Maybe he just needed to finally get healthy to the point where they could trust him, or maybe it just took him this long to kind of get his groove in this offense. Whatever the case is, we know they drafted him to be one of the top targets, so maybe now it's going to happen from here going forward. And then since it was National Tight End Day, let's throw another one in there. Look, if you still need help with the position, maybe a guy who was dropped in your league because of a bye week, that's Dalton Schultz. The Houston Texans might be able to help you. After coming over from Dallas, his first couple of games did really absolutely nothing, but before Houston's bye, he had scored a touchdown in 3 straight games and went over 60 yards in each of the last 2 games. I'll acknowledge that Tank Dell being out the last 2 games might have something to do with his target share increasing, but I also understand that this Texans team is still throwing the ball a ton. Schultz at tight end is going to be involved because that's why they brought him on for. It's going to need some different type of targets, including in the red zone. Schultz is a guy who I think is going to continue to succeed. This is a good time to pick him up, not just because he could have been dropped, but also get the Carolina Panthers in week 8. Might be a good spot to stream him. And then one more guy who could have been dropped in your league, not even a starting running back, but maybe he will be soon. Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. We've talked about stashing him early in the season, maybe picking up a couple of weeks ago. Well, Tennessee didn't play last week, and now heading into week 8, it looks like we might see a rookie quarterback, Will Levis. He could be starting because Ryan Tannehill was last seen on crutches with an ankle injury in the London game. In the short term, I'll just say this. With a rookie quarterback, they're going to lean more on the running game, as if they needed to more anyways. But also, especially Spears being the pass-catching running back here, this could benefit him. He's been really good as a runner this year, averaging 5.5 yards per carry. He's always kind of on the cusp of having standalone value. You don't really want to start him. You only would do that maybe if it was a heavy bye week or if you're just desperate with injuries and such. It's not a heavy bye week. There's no teams on bye this week. But I'll tell you, this might be a good time to stash him because we also know, whether it's true or not, there are rumors that Derrick Henry might be on the trading block. I don't like to buy into rumors, and I don't assume that any star NFL player will be traded because it doesn't happen nearly as much as it does in a sport like baseball or basketball. But if it does happen, I think I'd rather have Spears on my roster than on somebody else's. Those are the top waiver wire picks for week 8. Don't forget, we got everything you need to help you win this week, and it's right here in this playlist.